You just said your name then. Me and Brandon have been determining how to pronounce your last name. How is it? Did you say
It is like taffy. It is Jaffe.
Jaffe? Okay.
It's not spelled as such. You'd think there'd be an extra E on the end. And so whenever I give my card at a grocery store and people want to be respectful, they're like, "Oh, Mr. Jaffe." And I'm like, no, it's just Jaffe. Just pop an extra E or a Y on there. I don't know why anyway, but yes, it's Jaffe.
Jaffe, David Jaffe. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Gotcha.
But you can just call me Jaffe because that's what I go by.
Would you like a bit of a heads up about what we're going to talk about, or would you like to just
No.
I didn't. You know what? I think you'd
You're a retro channel. I love retro. The older I get, obviously, the more I love retro, which stands to reason. Somewhere along the lines, I crossed a threshold where, I'm still playing modern games and loving modern games and stuff. I'm obsessing over Silent Hill F right now and everything, but I will say, both in terms of the work I've done and also the joy of going back, I crossed some threshold where it's like, and I don't know if it's the same term in the UK as it is here, like adult contemporary artist or something, like when you're a really big celebrity singer, and then once you hit 30 or 35, you end up being played on a different station, for like people who grew up with your shit. And I think there was always some resistance to that originally. And now somewhere in the last couple of years, I crossed a line where I'm like, this is pretty cool. Not just to sort of have those stories and be someone who worked on games people enjoyed, but to also be able to go back, as my own, not just like the SNES and the NES, but the Atari. It's so cool to see what's happening right now with Atari, because for my generation, Atari is what y'all's generation is probably PS1 or SNES. I don't know how old you guys are, but I imagine your kid console was a PS1, correct?
Yeah, you're pretty spot on there for me.
N64, Mega Drive, PS1. That's kind of where we started, yeah.
Right. So, to see Atari now, I don't know if they're going to succeed in it, but they're coming out with lots of weird, funky hardware and, remasters of old games and, really doing a good job with their nostalgia brand. So I'm digging it. But so I think that's what your show's about, your channel's about, your podcast is about. And so I'm happy to talk about whatever you want.
Pretty much that, to be honest. And I'll pick your comment there that you're still playing retro games. We might as well just go straight into the podcast there. We'll do some magic in post-production. What is pulling you back? What type of games are pulling you back to the retro scene? And do you ever go back to your own games? Do you ever feel like, you know what, it's time to put some hours into that?
Well, okay, so there's two kinds of things I'm enjoying at a retro level right now. It's interesting because there's retro. I have a channel. I have I do a bunch of live video game streams, not playing, but like talking about games and a bunch of videos. And my audience tends to be around your age, a little older, a little younger, right? And so I've started going back recently to the PS1 and PS2 stuff, playing that, talking about that. Mm-hmm. But I also, for what I personally play, I do enjoy those. Like it's fun to go back and see what holds up and what doesn't hold up. Like on PS1, it's really. So I was, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I'll use the term heartbroken playing Tenchu. Because that thing plays like horseshit. It's hard to imagine. But it was so groundbreaking in a lot of ways for what it was. But you can go back and play, believe it or not, like the Bruce Willis game Apocalypse, and it's really good. Or you can go back, and you can go back and play the Insomniac FPS. What was that thing called? They did a first-person shooter on the PS1 called Infiltrator or something like that. Yeah. But it runs super smooth. It's super good, and so it's been a real interesting trip to start going back and seeing. What is holding up. But the stuff I will play outside of that, there's two things. I will absolutely go back to arcade games that still hold up, which is a joy to me as a one-time video game designer to discover that great gameplay holds up. Great gameplay is like a great movie. You can watch a movie from 1939 and it's very old and antiquated, but it still fundamentally works at a narrative level, at a character level, right? I can go back now and I can still play Miss Pac-Man. I can play Galaga. I can play, a lot of these classics, Asteroids even. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to play it for hours like I did when I was a kid, but I don't feel like I'm playing it just for the joy of nostalgia. It's a genuinely compelling interactive experience. And so I'm doing that. I'm very close to pulling the trigger on picking up the Atari. I think it's that new machine coming out this month.
Game Station Go?
Yeah.
I think so. It's got like 500 games, a lot of their games, arcade games, but it's portable. And I'm not a big portable guy. I don't care about the new Xbox, Ally and all that shit, because I usually I don't like to go outside anymore. Because it's scary. And so I have, it's not scary. It's just, it's better in here. But I usually play on TVs and monitors and stuff, but retro games, like a quick game of Miss Pac-Man on the toilet, in bed, sitting in front of the couch, waiting for a movie to unpause while, somebody's in the bathroom, that is, so I'm loving that. I'm loving playing that kind of stuff. And then here's what I've discovered recently in the last year, which I don't even know what the sub-genre is called, but there are new games, and you can mostly find them on Steam, that play and are designed to be like old school arcade games, if these were arcade games that were made back in the 80s and 90s, right? So mostly they're like Donkey Kong screens, so there's like single screen boards, and you clear a board, you go to the next board. But it's meant to be much more, even simpler than like, oh, we're going to make a Bionic Commando ripoff, or we're going to make a Battle Arena to Shinin ripoff. This is like, no, we're going for the pure nuts and bolts gameplay. And it's just a single screen at a time. And it's like this, some of these are really good. There's like, speaking of Retro Dodo, there's a game called Donut Dodo, I think is what it's called. And that game is a great deal of fun. And there's another one that same developer put out. It kind of reminds me of a game called Mappy. See, I know you guys are retro. I don't know how far back you guys go. Do you know the arcade games, or you guys, your definition of retro starts with PS1?
No, we go back to the dawn of gaming time. So like we cover everything. We had Jordan Mechner talking about creating Prince of Persia, working for Broderbund. So we go way back. We go way back.
Gotcha.
To arcade and beyond.
All right, so Mappy then and all that shit. So okay. So that's kind of, I'm all over with that. But I'm loving that. I don't know what the subgenre is called, but I'm loving that, and I'm loving the Atari stuff. I'm loving going back with the PS stuff. But I'm still, like I said, I'm playing Silent Hill F. Ghost Yote comes out tonight, I think, at 9:00. I'm looking forward to playing that.
Nice.
Chronos from Bloober Team is amazing. There's just so many great games out there. So I'm having a good time. Oh, do I play my own games? Sorry, Seb.
No,
do I play my own games? Not really. I've been doing some videos about my older stuff, and in that I'm kind of starting to go back and look at them. But mostly for me, once they're done, they're kind of done. I didn't work on a game called God of War Ascension. I had left the company by then, but I did play the opening of that about a year and a half ago on the PlayStation Cloud streaming, whatever, because that's the only way you can play it unless you have your PS3 still, which I don't. And I was surprised how much I enjoyed that. And I was surprised how much I enjoyed a few years before that playing God of War 1, just the opening level, and going, and again, to toot our own horn, but that fucker's really well paced. And it's antiquated, and it's got, it's old fashioned in some of the way, and our platforming was pretty rotten even for the time. But it moves. I mean, it doesn't let you, it doesn't get you stuck for too long. It moves. And I was like, wow, that was all intentional. That was the hope. And it was really cool to go back and go, that still actually kind of can get its hooks in you. So, all right. Sorry. That's the complete answer to your entire question. I'm sorry.
Well, maybe while we're on God of War, we should carry on that mindset. What do you think, Brandon?
Why not?
I mean, for
Brandon, whatever, man. I don't give a shit. What the fuck you want to do?
It's 20 past 8 here. Brandon's putting
I've been up since 5 a.m. I've changed 20 nappies today. I do want to add on to something there, David, about old games that have kind of lived up to the standard, and something which I found myself playing the other day was Mickey Mania on the Mega Drive. For some reason,
he's shaking his head. He's shaking his head.
That I still enjoy. I think it's because I played it as a child. I have vivid memories of it, and the challenging and the really fucking annoying parrots that you put in. But that game was fun.
No, look, that was the first game I was ever a designer on, and
really,
yeah, and it was a real hard game to work on. For a lot of reasons. One is I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I didn't know what a game designer did. I thought I was like in charge of everything. And I drove the guys at Traveler's Tale, John and Andy. It was just two of them at the time, batshit. But it was also the fact that there was a different mentality, it seemed, happening in Europe for platformers. So they had just made this game called Pugsy, which had come out, I think, on, I don't know what it came out on, but Sega Genesis or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was all these really short little bite-sized levels. And I fucking hated that. I was coming from Sonic and specifically Super Mario World and, other games like that. And I'm like, I want a big level that I can explore and all this shit, And so there was a constant fight there. There was a constant fight between,
Is it a fight with the team or just the technical side?
No, the team. The team was me and Mike Yam, who went on to do like Jet Moto and Warhawk, and the guys out at Traveler's Tales. And it got so bad that eventually we only communicated through our producer, who communicated to them because, and they weren't wrong. They're like, they had made games before. They knew the process, and Mike and I were like, "What about this? What we had no clue what we were doing, but we still had a lot of good stuff to contribute." Even things that I remember we pitched the Mickey Mania game along with the Lion King game. And Disney came out to us and we had pitched both of them. And we ended up obviously getting the rights to do the Mickey Mouse game, and Virgin went off and did Lion King, which was a much bigger hit for a lot of reasons. We assumed Mickey Mouse was, a big deal. And at that time it was like no one gave a shit about Mickey Mouse. That game came out the same Christmas as Earthworm Jim, Donkey Kong Country, and some other thing. And it's
that's a tough time.
Yeah, and it got great reviews, but it's like nobody, unless you're under 4, wants to play fucking a Mickey Mouse game. They're wanting to play Earthworm Jim. They think that's what's cool. Mickey Mouse isn't cool anymore. But anyway, so we would have these, fights and challenges, and it was a really hard group of lessons. But I think that's how it's supposed to be when you're starting in something. You get a bloody nose and you kind of have to sort of learn how to do it. And, but we had pitched the Lion King and we had pitched Mickey Mania, and Mickey Mania had like what we called the coming at you perspective, which is the first I can remember of a character kind of running into the screen, away from something. And then it's
rolling.
And it became real well known with, Bandicoot and, hell, I'm playing, there's a sequence like that in Silent Hill F and South of Midnight. Right. But so that was Mike and I. And Mike was the one who originally conceived it, but obviously without the Traveler's Tales guys, it would just be an idea, right? So there was a lot of that kind of tension. But the other thing about Mickey Mania looking back now is I wish I would have known more, because I think that game is tuned terribly. I think like if you look at that opening level on Steamboat Willie, you can't tell what hurts you and what doesn't hurt you.
Yeah, you don't know where to go.
There's no visual cueing, and none of us knew what we didn't know, including the Traveler's Tales guys, of like, dude, there's these little whistles that whistle and send steam up, right? And you don't know when those will damage you and when they're non-threatening. A lot of things like that I just think it was a poorly tuned game. And I know people have nostalgia for it, but out of all the games I've ever worked on, I would say that would be the one I would have the hardest time completing today. Not because it's super hardcore, but because it's just so shittily, poorly tuned, and visual language is so poor in that game.
It's mad because thinking back to like when Brandon and I were kids playing that game, if we'd have thought we're going to fast forward a couple of decades and be talking to the guy who made it, it's absolutely it's madness. How did you get to that point from? I mean, you started off being a games tester, and then you got to being a designer, and you've just said then you didn't really know what you were doing at this point. But talk us through the point of starting testing games and then getting this first big kind of job with Traveler's Tales and what that looked like for you at the time.
Yeah, and I will ask, did you guys play, because I know in the UK they came out with it, that we had licensing issues over here. It almost came out over here and it didn't, which is there was a PS1 version. I think they called it Mickey's Wild Adventure on the PS1. But I'm not sure which one you guys played, but it's basically the same. I think the PS1 one was basically the Sega CD version that had a lot more bells and whistles and voice acting and shit like that.
Mine was on the Sega, but...
Oh, okay, yeah. But yeah, so I had started as a tester that summer just to find a job. I was trying to get into the movie business and TV business and stuff. And because I had been making films and, I was always a gamer. Like I played, the first game I ever played, I think was probably Boot Hill, back in 1975. I owned consoles. I had the Atari, the Coleco, Apple II, was programming games, but I was not a guy that was on a trajectory to be a game creator I was not a hardcore gamer. I was like a very hardcore casual gamer. So I would play and be aware of a lot of things. But when I first started testing, they put a Super Nintendo controller in my hands and the other testers made fun of me because I was used to playing Sega, which had 3 buttons. And suddenly I get this thing that has 4 face buttons and 2 shoulder buttons, and I'm like, I was intimidated by it. I think it's 4 face. Yeah, Sega had 3, Nintendo had 4 face and 2 shoulder. Yes, and so, but I was still, playing the shit out of Mortal Kombat in the arcades and stuff. So anyway, I started as a tester, but I came to it with the mindset of somebody who I had already sold TV shows to movie studios and TV studios and stuff. So I wasn't, quote, just a gamer going, hey, it's fun to test games. I was a guy who, had big ambitions to make shit of my own. And so the minute you get to Sony, or probably almost any company really, but at least at that time, you show up and you're like, hey, if I just raise my hand and say, I want to play with all these cool toys, most people just show up and go home at the end of the day. It's a job. And I think Mike and I looked at it as an opportunity. And so within 2 months, we had heard about the Disney thing and we were like, hey, we want to design something and pitch it. And no one else was offering. So they said, okay. And, it was a good pitch. It was a good design and we ended up getting it. And then they said, okay, now you're the designers for Sony on this, Sony ImageSoft. And we just thought, we know what we're doing. And so we got the job, we got the promotion. We were no longer testers, but we had no fucking clue. Like, I mean, we would come up with ideas and go, right? That's it, right? And then the programmers are like, okay, but we're not, I think we looked at the programmers, or I certainly looked at the programmers at that time in my career as just hands. I was like, I have the ideas, I have the creativity, I have the design, and you're someone that shows up and does what I need you to do. And I'm not really interested in your opinion, and I wasn't a dick like that, but I just assumed, just like if you're a movie director, and I'd been directing student films, you don't go into a movie set if you're directing and go, I need to check in with the grip to make sure that he likes this motivation I'm giving the actor, and so I just thought there was that hierarchy, and it's much more of a team sport. I mean, movies are as well, but not to this degree. This, especially when you're coming out of an era where most games were designed by the programmer and the artist, and there weren't even job titles called designers at Sony. We were officially on the hierarchy as like assistant producers because there was nothing in the HR handbook to say what is a designer. So. We were probably the first ever hired game designers at Sony because of that. But yeah, it was a very good, rough learning experience. There was a lot of failure in a lot of the games we worked on back then, both as testers and assistant producers and designers, until we eventually realized I think we know what we're doing. We understand the dynamic of a team and all that shit. So
crazy. What was the culture like then? Like trying to develop an entire Sega Mega Drive game, was there demand by Sony and others to get this out the door quickly? Was there, what do they call it now when they
Crunch?
You try and squeeze into, yeah, that's the one, the crunch.
Well, okay, so we for the longest time, like on Mickey Mania or Cliffhanger or Skyblazer or Hook or any of these Super Nintendo games that Sony or the full motion video stuff that we produced, like Ground Zero Texas for Sega CD or whatever, all of these things were externally produced. So the developers were all over the world. So I'm sure they were crunching and we were crunching in our own way with testing and designing, but it was a different time in that if you wanted to be on the shelf for Christmas, it wasn't like today where you could conceivably be working up to a week before if you're first party, and then they rush you through certification and then they upload the latest patch and then you're off to the races. You had to have, if I remember the timeline correctly, if you wanted to be out as a Christmas title, you needed to have everything locked and all of your ROMs pressed into the motherboard, and that was it. There were no more changes. That had to be ready by like June or July, because then you had to manufacture all this shit. And so there was definitely crunch leading up to it. And Sony ImageSoft for the most part was historically known for making shit. Every now and then something good got out. Mickey Mania got out. Skyblazer got out. Hook got out. And all of those games were honestly the guy who really ushered me in, Alan Becker, who went on to run Sony Santa Monica and run Sony Japan. It made sense that it all came through him, while all the other producers were just pumping out. I mean, you should go back if you want to just literally feel. If you ever feel like a failure and you don't want to feel like a failure, go look at Cliffhanger for the Game Boy from the Sylvester Stallone movie. It is one of the ugliest, strangest, most disgusting pieces of software I think that has ever been put,
I really want to try this now.
Yeah, please take a look. It's awful. It's awful. But we published that alongside Hook, which was a great fucking game, for the Super Nintendo.
Game, yeah.
Right, but I forgot what your question was. I'm sorry.
Just about crunches and stuff. And
right.
And the culture.
But yeah, of course. But once we got into the PS1 days and we had our own development and we were flying out to Utah because they weren't like making the games in the UK, we were part of the team with those guys. Yeah, then you started to feel. And certainly on Twisted Metal 1, those guys in Utah crunched like motherfuckers. It was their first game. They did not want to miss the date. It was, they needed that relationship with Sony to work, and it worked great. But yeah, there was a lot of crunch for sure. There always is. If you want to do a good job, I think that's anything. I think that's the podcast you're doing. That's the website you have. That's my stream. If you want to do well, you push.
It's interesting that you say that, you have to get everything ready by June,
July, yeah.
For me, that kind of ethos of that kind of workflow is nice because you've got a lot of time. It's not like rushing to a week before Christmas and then rushing things through. For me, just seems like working.
It's the same thing, though.
It seems to me that seems like working to the last minute, and like there's the kind of a culture of we've got to get this done. We've got to get this done. I don't know. For me, like getting it done with that time about that much time in advance just feels a little bit more like. I don't know, like it's more structured, more easy to cope with, or do you just see them as exactly the same thing?
It's exactly the same thing. Whether or not it's snowing outside and you're hearing Christmas carols, or it's, summer movie season is in full bloom, you still have June 6th when the doors shut forever. And back then, when the doors shut forever, there were no patches, even up until like God of War on PS1 or PS2 games. We shipped God of War with some things I would go back and I hate that are still in the game. But those days, we didn't have that luxury back then. So, and I even remember sitting on a phone call with marketing and somebody else, and it was all the producers sitting around because Sony had the rights to do this C+, C- level baseball game called ESPN Baseball or whatever the fuck it was. Which in America obviously was a big seller or could be a big seller. And they're like, we don't think the game's good enough for Christmas. And it was a huge deal because if it didn't make Christmas, that meant we had to add like 4 more months of development. So it would come out in April. And it was in some ways it was a lot harder. And I know a lot of gamers miss those days of you get the cart and that's it. Or you get the disc and that's it. And I get that joy of simplicity, and there's no uploads and patches, and it is what it is. But games, I don't know. I think you could think back to like 10 games that were released on the Super Nintendo or PS1 that if they had the ability to patch them, what would that be? Would it be a better game? And I think the answer is probably yes in most cases. So.
Yeah, we spoke with Argonaut Games, and they said when they developed Croc, that Sony basically chucked the analog sticks at them a month before they had to release. And it's like, holy shit, we now have to chuck in and learn camera control for analog sticks. And they said, yeah, we did a terrible job there, and they admit it. And I would somewhat agree there.
It's like we said, how are they supposed to know? Like when you're given that time frame, it's never gonna work, is it? And
no.
But then again, when they were saying about the fact that they've remade the Croc remaster, they've included the original controls in there because people just loved them so much. They've got new and old controls, so it just shows that even if you can change stuff, even if you can patch things in, people do still love a game for its flaws and for its intricacies and its nuances that other people might hate. And I guess it's what you come to know and get used to, isn't it? Perhaps
it's what you get used to. I mean, it's Stockholm syndrome, which is one of the things I think sometimes with gamers. Well, I do. I say that to a lot of gamers sometimes because a lot of times they will embrace and support a lot of really bad business practices on the part of developers and publishers, and they really seem to, but it's like, that's what they know. That's what they're comfortable with. Right. And so I think you have to be careful of being able to go, am I loving this because it brings me back to a time that was simpler, that I felt safe, that, most, not all tragically, but a lot of kids feel that way if they're being raised in even a semi-decent environment, that someone else is taking care of them. And in that, I think that's what a lot of people are pining for. And you can bolt those feelings onto a game. Like I've had people come to me with like Twisted Metal, and I'm always, I've my relationship with how I take these statements has changed over the years but they'll come to me and say, this game means so much to me. This game was my childhood, or God of War, or anything. And on one hand, I can take it as, hey, we did a really good job. We made a really great game that fell into the laps of people that it was good enough to play. But when they start saying things like, this was the one thing, playing Twisted Metal 2 with my dad on Saturdays, that was the only time we had together. That's not the game, right? It wasn't like we were designing the game and going, okay, now in this week, we're going to work on game mechanics that help fathers and sons connect, right? None of that was in our head. We were just trying to make a really cool game. And that happened to be the memories that somebody bolted onto their experience. And we get to be the recipients of that now, of those good feelings. But it's always, it's very, for me, I have found it's been very important to understand what the messages that come to you really are. Like today, I'll show you actually. I haven't opened it yet. I'm going to do it on a stream, but Sony Santa Monica sent me this today. And it's still shrink wrapped. It's like the God of War 20th anniversary retrospective thing, right? And
nice.
And I was sitting there and I was talking to somebody, and they said, do you realize that there's a large percentage of people, not like we're not talking the same percentage of people who know Star Wars, but there's a large percentage of people on the planet that, whether it's God of War or Twisted Metal, they're aware of what you've put out there, and, you've brought them some happiness and some joy and all that. And I said to him, on one hand, I take that with a great deal of pride and joy, and it makes me happy to know that, hey, I got to do some things with great teams that made some people happy. But on the other hand, I told him, I said, but I've sat in meetings before with shit like this, where the marketing guys or the PR guys will be like, how do we make this feel special? Right? How do we pull the strings of manipulating the market and the audience so they'll feel like this thing that's just a bunch, fundamentally, I'm sure it's going to be a great book and it's going to be cool, but so much of it is PR and so much of it is marketing and so much of it is playing on people's nostalgia. And I also have that side of it where I go, I know I could just lean in and just be the happy guy who's just like, oh, everything's, because a lot of fans want that. And I get that, a lot of fans don't want to know how the sausage got made. They're like, dude, I make my own fucking sausage at my job. Could you please just feed the fantasy of mine that this shit is just a joy? And I totally get that desire. And I get why there's value in being that performative. But my brain, I'm always fighting that, going, on one hand, I get it. And on the other hand, I'm just like, dude, it's not real all the time. Does that make any sense? What the fuck I'm saying?
Yeah, I
definitely. Because we're seeing that in the retro space with like remasters in cheap, tacky products that have just had certain games glued to them, and they're just trying to take that IP and milk you a little bit. And that's our job at the end of the day, mine and Seb's job, to filter that from the actual good stuff and the things you get value from the lower end kind of tacky products that are flooding the market, unfortunately. But it makes people money. So
do you have a bittersweet relationship with keeping on God of War? Do you have a bittersweet relationship with the work that you've done back then? The way you were speaking about how you sit in the marketing meetings and people say, how do I make this feel special? When you think about that, does that make you think about the creative process differently back then? Or does it make you feel like a different relationship to the work that you've done as, we all get older and anniversary products like that do come out? Do you sit there and still think, I made one of the best PS2 games of all time, like I'm super proud of this? Or do you sit there and think, this is like something that I almost don't connect with the same anymore because I've moved on to different products and different things?
I have moments where I do connect with it. For some reason, I connect more with Twisted Metal than God of War, even though I was, in the studio every day, every night for God of War. Whereas with Twisted Metal, I was working in Santa Monica and then I would fly out to Utah. I think Twisted Metal is more of a representation of my spirit, even though Kratos is as well. But yeah, I think I will always flux with how I feel about what we got to do. There are moments where I'm like, I think it's so cool that, because now the Twisted Metal TV series, at least over here, I don't know if it's there in Europe yet or if it's even doing well, but over here, it seems to be doing well. People seem to like it. There's a God of War TV series coming soon from the guy who did Battlestar. And I'm not involved really in either of these, certainly not the God of War one. But the fact that there is a possibility because of Sony continuing this stuff that I could be dead and gone and my kids or my grandkids could be like, oh, my dad was a big part of that. That I left that behind. I mean, ultimately, it's all the Earth's going to explode. No one's going to care. But in terms of, there are moments where I feel that you goddamn right. It's coming in October, November. That fucking comet. What is it? 3-1 whatever Atlas or whatever.
I need to get this podcast out before it does. So if you can have a sway on that, then I'm going to have to hurry up.
I'll see what I can do. I'll call the aliens. But I vacillate quite a bit on that. And the other thing I'll say though is that I had an experience at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con about 10 years ago that really put all this in perspective for me, which is if you've ever been to Comic-Con, you come in and off to the left for the most part are the big companies. You've got the Marvel booth, Capcom would have a booth sometimes, Sony would have a booth, Fox Studios, Star Wars. And then as you move to the right and you get into a lot more of the indie comic creators, brand creators, things like that. And what I noticed was that there really wasn't much difference between the work I do, which is the writing and the design and the narrative and the creative part, between what's on the right and what's on the left, other than the stuff that got big. Yeah, it was good. And I own that. And I own that with the teams I got to work with. But I also am aware that that was also a lot of money for marketing, a lot of money for PR, a lot of money for the sales guy who made $250K that was able to go into Target and Walmart and GameStop and game and convince them to put Twisted Metal Black on an end cap so more people would see it, when they walk past the shelf. That's not a random placement. That Jesus. Back in the day was optimum shelf space, right? So there's so much that goes into why something found its way to a gamer where he's sitting with his dad on Saturday and having this emotional experience. And it all comes back to me because I'm the face of the product at times. It becomes hard to, you don't want to say thank you and act as if what they're saying in some ways I guess it's more of a symbol on behalf of all of those people that did all of that work. And it could have been any game in a lot of ways. Doesn't mean, it couldn't have been Blasto. Sony first party put out a game called Blasto on PS1 that didn't do well at all. A lot of people liked it, but it didn't do well at all. And they put just as much, if not more money and time into that, and it didn't connect. So I'm not trying to take anything away from the quality of what we did, but there's so much more that goes into it that, and I know this is a long way to answer your question, but there's so much more that goes into it, why something hits and why something connects, that you can't, unless you're not interested in being honest, and you can't really you can't take it with pure gratitude, because there was so much else there that had nothing to do with the thanks that you're getting. You know what I'm saying? So.
I reckon we lead on to God of War now. There's going to be a lot of listeners wanting to pick your brains here. And from what I believe, you were the lead designer. And I just want to kind of clarify, what does that actually entail for someone that doesn't really know? Like, are you leading the team? Are you literally placing every fucking plant?
No.
On
God of War 1, I was the lead writer, I was the lead designer, and I was the game director. And I think when people say you're the creator of the franchise, I think that's true. I was the creative director on God of War 2, but my day-to-day on God of War 1 was writing the story, working with a couple of other great writers, better writers than me, working on the narrative of it, working with the designers, playing their levels, telling them I want this level, this structure, this pacing of the game. So like when I said at the beginning of the podcast, I really am still proud of the pacing of God of War 1. I had all that mapped out on a whiteboard, and it was conscious. It was like, I looked at it like trapezes in the circus. And I was like, I want the player to do this, and he's probably going to start getting bored of this, and something else needs to swing his way to capture his attention before he gets bored. Oh, thank God we came up with a puzzle. Or, oh, thank God we just made a room filled with pots to break, even though that's not very interesting. Where you put it in the pacing gives your brain a little sorbet, a little break, and it trapezes you to the next thing, which is like a mini boss or whatever, right? So I did that. And then I also just oversaw the entire vision of the world building and the franchise itself. Who is Kratos? What does he look like? What are the characters? Who are the voice actors? Everything, and then the actual managing the team, that was all Shannon. She was the producer. The way I always talked about it was, I decide what the ball looks like with the team. I'm not drawing this stuff. That was Charlie Wynn. That was Ken Feldman, but I decide what the ball looks like. She figures out how to get the ball to the top of the hill by rolling it to the top of the hill, right? So, but then you work with incredibly talented programmers and artists and concept artists and sound engineers and all this stuff. And your vision is guiding them. And, the more you learn and the more you learn about the team you're working with, the people on the team that get it, and then they will be able to contribute their own stuff to it. And the people that you have to not micromanage, but tell them more, this is the piece of concept art I need the level to look like, but there's always people on the team that become your co-creators, and you identify them, and it's like, oh, Charlie's got this, don't worry about it. Eric, who directed God of War Ragnarok, and Derek, both those guys worked with Corey at Paradox. They made these really, not great games like Backyard Wrestling and stuff like that. They came over to animate, and Eric and Derek, and I think Corey was involved too. By the time we got to the final boss in God of War 1, which was Ares, other than the conceptual parts of it, I was just like, go. They designed all of that, but I wouldn't have necessarily given that same job to another designer who was great, but they were really great at doing other kinds of, like, I need a gimmick for this level. Okay, that's what he's really good at, but I don't want to unleash a whole boss fight for that guy. So, it really depends.
You said something earlier, which I picked up on. You said there's a lot of your spirit in Kratos. And from a writing perspective, as a writer and as the editor-in-chief of the brand, like, I'm interested in how you went about creating narrative for God of War? Like, what was your process for that? What was the process behind getting the Greek lore and the mythology? Have you been a fan of Greek mythology all your life? Is it something that just came to you one day? You know, how did that whole situation look for you in creating this vast storyline?
Yeah. Well, I had loved Greek mythology since I was a kid. I loved Clash of the Titans. I loved Jason and the Argonauts and all those movies. And then I loved learning about it in school. So I was sort of primed for that. And then when it came time to figure out what this game would be after Sony Santa Monica had done their first internal game, which was Kinetica, I had a couple of different ideas and basically doing a cinematic action. You know, I was looking at Onimusha and Devil May Cry and Eco and going, I want to put that through my filter of kind of hyper-violent Greek mythology. And that was all we knew at the beginning, right? And I knew at the beginning I wanted a character. I didn't know his name was Kratos. I think we called him Dominus for a very long time. But I wanted him to be just like our version of Wolverine or the Hulk, just the most vicious, brutal motherfucker on the planet. And from there, we started building because of the schedule, and we were writing while we were building. So we started the middle of the game production first, which is the Pandora's Temple. And I knew I wanted that because I wanted kind of an Indiana Jones aesthetic in the middle of the game, because I knew the opening aesthetic was going to be more of a traditional Greek Roman movie set kind of thing.
So you were building and you were developing and writing at the same time. So you didn't know the ending.
I had no idea what was going to be in that Pandora's Temple.
So right? You had the pacing and everything, but you were just keeping it going at the same time. You were just a bit more.
But sometimes the pacing, like I didn't design the Hydra level until much later, which is the opening level, and that was paced, but I had to pace that backwards because I had already done the Athens level, which is where the boat pulls into after Hydra, right? So it really was, we were making it as we were going. And that was a pain. Even the look of Kratos was very late. It took 18 months and it took well over 1,000 drawings from Ken Feldman, Charlie Wynn, Terry Smith, you know, all of these amazing artists coming in trying to sort of nail it. For a long time, it was just a guy running around with, you know, sandals and a Greek feather plume like Harry Hamlin in Clash of the Titans. And it's like, well, this can't be our character, but put it in for now. Everything begat everything else. The Blades of Chaos only existed because we wanted a camera pulled back so you could see the enemies coming from behind, right? And you actually had a spatial awareness. But the problem is you pull the camera back, you can't see your hero. And so I was talking to the design team about it, and we were looking at Shinobi on PS2 from SEGA. And the Shinobi character had this incredibly beautiful red flowing scarf that you couldn't take your eyes off of. And Joe Wright, one of our designers, she said, well, we could do something like that. What if we have melee weapons, but they're attached to like rope or chains or something, and that would be what we can glow and put effects on. And so in that, you'll never be able to lose Kratos in a fight. Well, that's
amazing.
Right. And then that suddenly was, oh, well, now we have to write something for the blades. What are these things? Right. And so we're writing that based on the design. And one of the stories I've told many times, I'm sure if people listen to this and they follow God of War, they've heard it ad nauseum, but it's worth retelling because I think it's the best example of this, which is Charlie, you know, I had finally figured out Kratos because I had seen American History X and Ed Norton in that movie. I was like, okay, that, even though he's a horrible character at first in terms of his values, he oozed this sense of raw anger, masculinity, take whatever the fuck you want. You know, when the cops pull up to him and he's just smiling like, I don't give a fuck, motherfucker. You know, I liked that aspect. And so Charlie had taken that and distilled that into what became Kratos. And I went over to see him drawing it. And I said, oh, that is so cool, because he had just this pure white skin. And he said, no, I do a layer of primer and then I'm going to paint over that so the color pops more. And I was like, no, that's fucking awesome. You know, that makes him, that's interesting. And so in that, then I went off and wrote the story about, oh, those are the ashes of his family, but all of these things, because we were doing all of it at the same time, they fed into one another. And in our case, because we had such a great producer in Shannon, they not only fed into one another, but they improved the game and we could still move. I don't think you could do that today with games being as big as they are and teams being as I mean, you could do it if you're doing a AA or an indie game, but you couldn't do that today doing God of War Ragnarok 2 or whatever, or God of War Egypt or whatever, because you've got teams working 24/7 scattered across the world, and you don't have the opportunities as much for those kinds of happy little accidents, and if you have a happy little, I mean, hell, I made a video the other day about Twisted Metal 1. Twisted Metal 1 did not get multiplayer, which was the whole bread and butter of that whole series, it turned out, until a programmer came in like either a week before alpha or post alpha and said, I want to try to put in split screen. That game was never meant to be a multiplayer game, right? But try doing that now. Try having somebody come in and playing Ghost of Yote or Ghost of Tsushima before Yote comes out, and they're at alpha, and he's like, I want to add multiplayer. You can't do that now. There's too many departments involved, and there's too much testing, and there's too much monetization design needed, and it's a very different experience now. So, which is why I often say, if I were to ever get back into games, I'd be stunned if I didn't work in the indie or AA space, because I think that's the fun of it. Otherwise it just feels like it's like you're, I don't know what it feels like. I've never directed a game at that level, but I can't imagine it's as fun.
You're trying to like move a big ship, I can imagine. In any small change, you just need so many people to give you the thumbs up.
And it's so expensive that you've got a lot of people that have to sign off for no reason other than they have to cover their asses. And so even something as simple as, I want to change the look of the character. It's like, well, marketing already approved that. This is a $400 million game. You just can't change the color of the guy's skin. Like, well, I want to. So
is there anything you wish you changed or added to Kratos or the first God of War that you regret or wish you added?
I've been thinking about that recently, but I mean, the obvious one is there was one of the reasons I think God of War ended up being as successful as it is and was is because we play tested the crap out of it. I was obsessive. And Sony built us a room in Santa Monica where we could have the TV. This is kind of standard now, but back then it was pretty innovative, where we had the TV screens upstairs and the playtesters were downstairs, or vice versa. And we could videotape them playing, and we also had their faces there on the screen. And so not only were we able to watch them, I took the videotapes home after every playtest, and I went through every single goddamn one with a notepad. And then I would come back in Monday and create a massive Excel spreadsheet of like, okay, based on the playtest we did Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, these are all of the things we have to change. And Shannon would be like, okay, well, you have to prioritize them 1, 2, 3, because we can't get them all. And lo and behold, though, it made a huge fucking difference. Like, I remember the Athens level, after every level, we'd say, okay, rate the level. And some levels were coming in at 8s and 9s and 10s. And some levels, like Athens, was like 4. And we could not get it past 4. And we just kept putting it through that machine, that playtest machine, until it got to like 8s and 9s. And it's amazing the stuff you learn. It's amazing that sometimes all it takes is, in God of War, we had these save points that were visualized by these beams of light, almost like the gods were letting you, and we had a puzzle that we wanted you to see the lock before you found the key, but people were finding the key. It wasn't a literal lock and key, but it's not fun to find the solution to the puzzle before there's even a puzzle to be had, right? You want to get stuck and then have that aha moment, right? Of like, oh, this is what's going to solve that, right? Well, the solve to that ended up being simply somebody going, let's put a beam of light to the right, and people will just instinctively, by now in the game, they're going to go save it because they don't know what's coming up. Why not save it to be safe? And in that, they saw a little bit of the path leading to the right that led to the lock. And so everybody started seeing the lock before they saw the key. And suddenly the ratings on that level went up to like 8s and 9s, right? So, I mean, So we did that like crazy, but the one level we didn't do it on was the final level, Hades, because we were running out of time and we figured, well, we've done this enough that we know how to do this now. We don't really need to play test. And lo and fucking behold, that there's a bunch of spike columns in that game that are nightmares to climb, not because it's supposed to be hard, but because Tim Moss, the lead programmer, warned us, but we didn't listen. We don't care. He's like, the collision's not really built to do that. We're like, we'll figure it out. And we put it in the game, and it's the worst part of the game. So that, to answer your question from an hour and a half ago, is what would I change? That's the one thing that I think is the main thing, is that piece of gameplay. But there's really not a lot. I got to do what I wanted with an amazingly talented team that made what I wanted better, and they added their own stuff to it. I don't look at God of War as, like, I look at Drawn to Death, which was a failure, which is the last game I worked on. I look at Calling All Cars, which a lot of people like, but it didn't do that well. I look at those games and say there are things I could do. I wish I could do over. Twist Metal 2012, I wish I could do over for parts of it. God of War 1, though, I don't have, other than that Spike Pillar, I'm very happy with how that game came out.
Where do you think, what do you think about the series as it's gone on then? Obviously, you created the characters, you created the series. How do you look at the likes of God of War for the PS4 and God of War Ragnarok, and how do you think about those going forward from your vision when you first started working on the PS2 titles?
So I am torn because God of War 2018 I thought was excellent. But I think the nature of what they had to do to make it relevant again, in my opinion, created a bit of a problem for them, which I think you see in Ragnarok, which I didn't care for. I think Ragnarok was wonderful combat, wonderful puzzle design. The audio is insanely good. The music, the performances of the actors, all the pieces are there. But I thought it was a very flat, dull game. And I never even finished it. I just couldn't. I got too bored of it, right? I think, though, they were fighting an uphill battle because it's a beautifully made game, but the character Kratos had to become in God of War 2018 in order to make him relevant again, because that story, not just the story of Kratos aging and mellowing, but the story that we told the press and that the fans bought onto, which is you were younger when you played God of War. Now you're an adult and you have adult sensibilities and your games have matured with you. And there were, that whole thing was brilliant. And I don't know how much of it was intentional on Corey's part, or he just followed a story he loved. And then that also, the press made their own narrative. I couldn't tell you how intentional it was, but there's no doubt that that contributed meaningfully to the love 2018 got, because there was this sense of, there was a meta going on outside of the narrative of Kratos that was about you, the gamer, if you had come up with God of War, and it made you feel good about the medium, and it made you feel good about, I'm no longer a little kid or whatever, you know, that really was effective. But what it did was it ended up turning Kratos into a character that I think if we were pitching Kratos today as a brand new character and he was the character he became for 2018, I think people would say he's boring. He's not interesting. He doesn't, you know, and that's how I feel about him. I don't like the character of Kratos now. I don't like Atreus. I love 2018. It was a great game, and it was a great home run, Hail Mary pass, I should say. It was a great Hail Mary pass of, this thing is long in the tooth. Nobody cares about God of War anymore. And Corey couldn't just make another one with better graphics. What they did was probably the only thing they could have done to save it. But it ended up, and again, I'm in the minority. Like, people yell at me on the internet all the time, and I'm like, I'm okay if you love it. I think that's great. That means that this thing that I got to work on for a while continues. Like I said, I could be dead and gone, and my kids and grandkids will still be like, you know, my dad worked on that. But for me personally, I find Kratos whiny. I find him mopey. I find Atreus annoying. And people are like, but he's matured. And that's, you know, and I'm like, that's cool. That's great. I'm not saying you shouldn't mature. I'm not saying that's not what, if I was reading a novel, that isn't what would happen. But to me, Kratos was designed to be a comic book hero, right? Wolverine, Old Man Wolverine I don't know if you've read Old Man Wolverine, but it's a great series, or a great graphic novel. But he's still Wolverine, right? It's not like, there's a moment at the beginning where he's trying to suppress the essence, but he's still fucking Wolverine. Spider-Man's still Spider-Man. That's why I think the new Indiana Jones movies are shit. And I love Indiana Jones. He's one of my favorite characters, but I don't want to see Indiana Jones deal with getting old and being sad and merry. And it's like, no, let him be James Bond, man. I don't need all of my heroes to be, Walter White or whatever, or some well-written, fleshed out character. Sometimes a dime store comic book pulp character is exactly what you need. And that's probably why I find the new God of War, and I'd say Ragnarok specifically, because I do think with Ragnarok Valhalla, which was the DLC, they did a much better job of bringing back some of the fun. And so it was still the new character Eric and Corey had done, but it wasn't as like, oh. But again, to be perfectly clear, it's not to disparage the game. I think the design, in terms of the level design, was amazing in Ragnarok. The combat was a blast. I even enjoyed controlling Atreus. A lot of people bitched about that. I liked the sections when I got to play Atreus, but I just found being in that narrative and being in that world slow, plotting, depressing. Everything was so fucking heavy and so, no, not for me. Not for me. But I love The Last of Us Part 2. It's not like I need every game to be super light and fluffy. It's just that series doesn't feel right to me when it's that goddamn somber.
Where do you see the franchise going? Do you probably have your own hopes and dreams of where it goes, but where do you think Sony's going to take it?
I think that I could be wrong, and obviously I'm biased because of what I just told you about how I feel, but I think they're in a little bit of trouble. I don't think that many people really care about a new God of War right now. I could be wrong. Now I know the one thing that had been rumored, which I was a big fan of, was I always wanted to do a 2.5D God of War or 3D locked to a plane, kind of like Prince of Persia, the last Prince of Persia, or Castlevania, like that kind of God of War. I don't know if it would sell that well, but like to give, that would be awesome. A Shantae God of War, whatever.
Have you played Shinobi Art of Vengeance? That was pretty sleek. Yeah.
Loved it, and I loved Ragebound, Ninja Gaiden. I thought was excellent. But I think creatively, in terms of, people are, we've always had intentions, even when I was working on it, to go to Egypt. And that's a big rumor that Egypt's the next one, blah, blah, blah. And that's cool. And, but I could be wrong because I'm biased. Maybe your audience will tell me, or you guys will tell me, but I don't think there's the same, oh my God, there's a new God of War coming that existed before Ragnarok after 2018. I want to say that bloom is off the rose, but maybe I'm wrong. Do you think I'm too close to it and people are chomping at the bit?
I read something.
Okay, there you go.
I read something somewhere that they were gonna. I mean, you kind of touched on God of War Egypt earlier. I read that they were going to be taking it to the Egyptian gods. I mean, I've been to ancient Egypt since I was a child. I think it's amazing. So to have have Kratos going into that world and, dealing with your Horuses and, you're going into the pyramids and all the different lore about the, the weighing of the heart and everything, all this kind of stuff that you read about in ancient Egyptian lore. For me, that would be incredible.
Yeah, I think the setting would be great. I actually did God of War 3 design had an Egyptian section, and I had designed that before because I was on it for like 3 weeks before I left and Stig came on. And the Sphinx, I loved the whole Sphinx. It was a boss fight, and the Sphinx exists because he froze it with Medusa's head. So that was the way he ended up killing the Sphinx. So we think it's just this thing that was built out of stone.
That's awesome.
But it's actually, it's actually this monster that Kratos ended up killing by using the Medusa's gaze on it. But yeah, I think the setting would be great. But I don't know. I think Kratos needs a bit of a revamp. I think, let Atreus grow up or let him get killed and then he gets rage. He doesn't have to be one note, but get rid of the beard, have some fucking fun, You
The
know,
only reason
get
I
out
grew a
there.
beard is because of Kratos. Come on, don't be saying this to me. Like,
Well, you can keep it. No, you know,
he's
you
my
know.
style icon. That's the only thing
Okay,
I'm
well,
going.
that's
I need the
aim
red lines
higher.
on my face, and then
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so but you know, I would say for me, you know, I'm very selfish in the 2.5D thing. I don't think that if they want to give that to like a smaller team or they want to pay Way Forward, who is a brilliant 2.5D Metroid developer, sure. But you don't want that to be the mainline God of War. But for mainline God of War, I think you've got to you've got to find a way to make him less somber and less Joel from The Last of Us. And I think you've got to make him look cool. I don't think the beard makes him look cool. I think the beard makes him look like an old guy who works the gas station. I don't look at him and go, "Whoa, that
how
motherfucker."
Brandon describes me, to be honest with you. So I would go.
Well, yeah, but you're not an old guy and you don't work at a gas. Nothing wrong with either one of those things. I'm just saying that he's not the star of a $400 million game to me. You know.
They have to tread carefully as well, because what happened with Horizon Zero Dawn, the second one didn't get the hype as the original, and even I would say Spider-Man's going down that route as well, like same shit, different cover art. So they do need to tread carefully. I wonder if they've jumped timelines or something. But the 2.5D, like I was really impressed with Shinobi and how and that was only 30 quid. $40.
The art in Shinobi and the animation in Shinobi are and it just plays great. It's amazing. And what I loved about that is that game comes out, I don't know if you knew this, but at least in America, Ninja Gaiden Ragebound full release comes out the same day Sega puts out their demo for Shinobi, right? So you got direct comparison. And what's funny is they were both great. In their own, at least I thought so. I don't know if you guys like Ragebound, but I thought they were both great in very different ways. Sega's been real ballsy lately. They did that, and then they put out, rightly so, the Sonic Cross Worlds Racing network test. And it wasn't really a network test because it was, this came out like 3 weeks before the game came out, right? So this was marketing. And they clearly felt good about it, and they should, because it was great, and it is great, I think. But they've just been like, fuck it. We're just going to, it's free. You don't have to pre-order it. Just fucking play it for us. And I don't know if it's doing well or not. I see there's lots of people streaming it. I don't know if it's sold well, but I think it's great.
Crossroads.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun.
It's got good ratings. I think IGN rated it better than Mario Kart World.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that. They're saying it's the game that Mario Kart World should have been, which is Nintendo are not going to be happy about that.
I think Sega's on the comeback. There's rumors of Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, Sonic is booming right now.
Yeah, the president of Sega, Shuji, used to do work. Like I knew him. I don't know if he was a consultant or a full-time Sony employee when I was there with God of War, but I remember he pulled me aside after God of War. Now he's president of Sega, doing an amazing job, and he's just like, dude, you need to be making more money. And I'm like, okay, I'm not disagreeing. Can you help me with that? And he's like, no.
Yeah, help.
I'm just letting you know you should be making more money. I'm like, fuck. Thanks for nothing, Shuji. But yeah, he's a good dude. A very talented dude, obviously.
We need to talk Twisted Metal. It's one of your crowning jewels. You love it.
In America.
Well, the way
nobody likes it in Europe.
I mean, I've played it. I loved it. Me and Brandon have played it. You speak so highly of it. I can tell the way you speak of it. It's one of your, your proudest games you've worked on. Talk to us about that.
I think God of War is a better game. I think Twisted Metal just reflects my heart more.
Okay.
Right? I always look at Twisted Metal like a garage band, like a cover band, and like a bar band or something. And they're never going to be, Led Zeppelin. They're never going to be like inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but it's scrappy and it has a lot of heart and it doesn't quit. And there's just there's a real reflection of, I think, my soul. I think Scott Campbell's soul, who was the co-creator with me and the producer out in Utah, Kellen Hatch. It feels like it has a real strong heartbeat. And what I love about it right now, because car combat straight up car combat. I still think there are things Sony could do with it and should do with it if they're going to explore that. And I'd never known what else to do with it because there's so much more fidelity of motion in modern shooters that when you put somebody in a car after the novelty wears off, you're like, I can't do all the stuff I want to be able to do. I can't strafe, I can't climb, I can't swing. And then you've got games like Fortnite and Warzone and stuff that have on foot and you can get in any vehicle anytime. And, so I was always like, I think that's played out. I've recently had some ideas of how you could actually make pure car combat relevant again at a very low budget, at least to start. But what I love is the fact that I had always thought the strongest part about Twisted Metal really was the IP. And sort of the world of Sweet Tooth, Calypso, and all these guys and stuff. And the fact that the TV show seems to be connecting with people, it's not connecting like it's getting Emmys, but again, it was never meant to be, inducted into the Hall of Fame. Makes me go, I hope Sony is seeing that at the game side and going, okay, maybe we don't do pure car combat anymore with Twisted Metal, but there is a really cool IP here that we could do open world action. We could do survival horror. There's a neat world here, and I hope they get on that, is what I would say.
I think what a lot of people want are potentially remasters or remakes. If you had any kind of thought on that or opinions on that, or people coming up and asking you to
People ask all the time, but the only one that really could be remade or remastered is 2012. I think when you can remaster, like I've seen people on the PC, they've gone back and either got the original textures or up-res the textures from 2000 or from Twisted Metal 1. And it does look better. And I do think those games could be adjusted to be played better. I don't know if the cost would merit it though, because fundamentally after the novelty wears off, I think a lot of people would go, okay, but I still can play other games where I can do a lot more, But I think 2012, we didn't address it brilliantly, but we tried. The problem is that game's kind of stuck on PS3. It's hard to, and there was a lot of back-end stuff with the Sony servers and friends list and matchmaking and trophies that had effect on the Sony side.
Right.
And then our own net code came from the Eat Sleep Play side, the developer side. And so to remaster that, I think would probably be more effort than it's worth, but I don't think it's a terrible idea. I think it's worth looking into. And I'm sure people have, but I definitely think I don't think we've seen the last of Twisted Metal as a game at Sony, but I don't know if you're going to get a straight up car combat game again. But I think it's hard to look at it now and go, there's too much meat on the bone of this intellectual property not to do something with it. So
what worries me is though that like you could get, I love the Twisted Metal games, and then I think of it the same way as with Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, and then getting Nuts and Bolts, which just took the IP and just made it like something that I and many other gamers around the world absolutely just didn't connect with whatsoever, because it felt like it had kind of the essence there, but just changed it too much. My worry is that if you were to do something open world and take away the car combat elements of it, it then just becomes something that has the same feeling as Nuts and Bolts does for me with the Banjo-Kazooie series.
Yeah. I don't think you would call it Twisted Metal then, right? I think and it doesn't mean you'd not have car combat, but like for me, I would probably, if somebody came to me and said, look, do something with Twisted Metal, I would probably start with survival horror. I would take the Black Universe and I would say, we don't call it Twisted Metal, whether we call it Sweet Tooth something or whatever. Because Sony doesn't really have a first party horror game that's really, I don't believe, unless I'm forgetting something, I don't think they really have. The closest would be Returnal, right? I mean, do they really have? I mean, you can go back to Siren or Ghost Hunter, but nothing relevant today. And it's a pretty lucrative space for them not to be in it. So I would probably explore that, or I would explore a very low budget, pure car combat game that really doesn't cost a lot, but could grow into a financial success if people are vibing with it, with some changes, so it's more interesting to play than just a traditional Twisted Metal.
What are you thinking? Like a little Micro Machines kind of battle royale?
Look at Rocket League. People love Rocket League.
I'm not telling you.
Car combat, but people.
I'm not telling you what I'm going to do, but I think I solved it. I think I know what let's put it this way. I haven't been that jonesing to get back in development, but if Sony were to ever call me now and say, okay, Jaffe, we hear you have an idea. We'll give you 4 months and 2 programmers and we'll pay you a little bit of money to make a prototype. I go, okay. Because I want to see if I'm right. I think I know how to do it now and make it relevant. But yeah, I mean, but I think you could do open world as well, where you could have places to go where there is car combat, and you could have kind of like in Elden Ring places to go where there's not just car combat, but there's car combat multiplayer, right? So those things exist, but it's still, you know, you're not going to be able to sell a $40, $50, $60 pure car combat game in this day and age. I just don't see it.
And with the likes of GTA coming out, where the fucking customizations in that are ridiculous.
Right. And you can already play Twisted Metal in GTA. You can go online and say, okay, everybody. Well, it's not called Twisted Metal.
Yeah.
But you can have car combat and just say, hey, we're just doing car combat today. Don't get out of your cars. Or if you get out of your cars, you have to get back in or you're out, you know, whatever. A lot of games do that already. So that can't be. You gotta really innovate in with the IP, whether you stay in car combat or not. But I do think there's something strong there. And again, I'm biased, and I'm also enjoying the fact that the series is coming off a very successful second season, and it seems like there's going to be a third, and most people seem to like it. I mean, I almost opted out after the first episode of the second season because it was dreadful. I was like, this is junk. What happened? Because the first season was a lot of fun. And then the second season was like, oh, fuck this. But then it really got good. I mean,
did you have any input into that?
You said you
only a couple of meetings with the first season, and that was it. It was, they didn't, I mean, these are the guys that worked, some of them worked on Deadpool, some of them worked on the Cobra Kai. I'm fans of both. I told them, I said, look, you guys don't need me, but I'm happy to be a resource for whatever that means. But they've nailed it. I mean, there's so much fan service in there. They did ask me to come to New Orleans to be in a cameo for season 1, but I turned them down because it was COVID and I didn't want to fly. You know, but I'm not really involved with it. No, but I am enjoying it as a fan.
It's nice that as a fan you're enjoying it, but also as the, you know, as the designer and, you know, somebody who has put their heart and soul into it, you are. I would say it's quite rare for someone to sit back and be like, you take this thing that I created and run with it. It's a very like open-minded way of looking at it, and also the fact that you are happy with the product as well that they've created and supported it too.
But maybe because I've had enough experience knowing that I'm rubbish as a film director and as a writer. I mean, I'm a good co-writer. But to me, what I say, but Twisted Metal, like 95% of the, maybe 90% of the Twisted Metal TV show is what I would have made if I had any skill at all directing and writing. The fact that they were able to do that and then make it way better than I could have imagined, what's not to love? It's fucking awesome, you know? But no, I'm very much enjoying it. They're doing I remember when Will Arnett, who does the voice of Sweet Tooth and his company produces it, they called me when I was at Bartlett Jones and was like, hey, apparently you're the guy we need to talk to about Twisted Metal. I'm like, well, I don't have the rights, but I was just like, you know, you get so many phone calls about things like that, you know, that you're like, okay, whatever. And then that one actually worked, you know? I mean, I was taking meetings with, you know, we were sending the God of War 1 script out to Daniel Craig 3 months after. We paid a guy $1 million to write it, and it was an okay script. You know, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's so many of these projects, you know, get discussed and talked about and money gets spent, but you never see them. And I think PlayStation Productions is doing a really good job. All their stuff has been, I haven't seen Until Dawn, but I know Until Dawn came out and kind of didn't do much, but I actually heard people say it was a fun movie. But everything else, even if it hasn't been a big hit, has been well made. You know, I thought Gran Turismo was a solid, fun movie. Uncharted did really, really well. It's going to get a sequel. So, you know, it's kind of cool to see.
One of the last questions, we don't want to keep you here all day. what are you working on next? I know you've kind of taken a step back, but is there anything you've got lined up, or you want to get your hands dirty again?
Okay, so I do. I have a very active YouTube channel, and I do a show over there called Gabbin' Games. I've been doing a show called Madhouse, which is more about aliens, UFOs, weird shit like that. But most of it is game content, and what I am, that's really, I'm all in on that right now. I've done a little consulting, but here's what I'll say. What I have found amazing about working on YouTube or podcast or whatever is it's very similar to my experience working with Sony, right? Which is you wake up and you have an idea and you're like, I'm going to try that. And sometimes it'll work great and other times it fails. But that reminds me so much of what was great about making games. There weren't a lot of people you had to answer to except the audience, and you could try shit and it didn't cost a lot of money to go, hey, I want to try to do a show about, retro games, but they're retro games that, I don't fucking have any ideas right now. I'm just retro games you never heard of, whatever, who knows?
Yeah.
Games that have pink in them. The color pink is dominant, whatever.
Brandon,
and you can try it.
Write these down, Brandon. We're going to make
it. Please.
Dynamite Heady.
You're right. Why a whole channel about Bubsy 3D. So I there's a joy in that and a freedom in that I started to sort of lose the more expensive these things got. I do find myself thinking maybe I could do some game stuff, but it would have to be the right situation. Like, I don't want to fly around like I did with Bartlett Jones and try to raise the money. I don't want to build a whole team. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that is just not fun. But if the right situation came along and it's like, hey, we have this team, we know you want to make this kind of game. They're a good team. It's funded. We have a good producer, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Things get a little bit more interesting. But for now, I'm very happy doing Gabbin' Games and making videos about my games and new games and old games. I mean, you guys know it's fun. I mean, you have a lot of freedom, So sometimes it's more fun to be a fan, I've found, than to be the creator. I'm enjoying playing games right now since I stopped making them as much, if not more, than when I was a kid, just playing them to play them. The minute you start making them, it's not that you lose interest in them, but you don't have the time. And it's, being a fan is a great deal of fun because you just get to see the good stuff.
Do you think you've fallen back in love with them in a way that you had possibly lost because of the pressure of being there and meeting deadlines and hoping people enjoyed what you were doing? And
I think that, and also the very responsible response when you're competing with other game creators. Like, you can't really, or I couldn't. Now, maybe there are really noble, mature people out there, but when somebody else would put out a game, I could enjoy it, but I would also want to compete with it. I would also want to take from it and learn from it and go, how can we do this better? Like, there was this whole layer of the professional aspect of what it means to play someone else's game that I think created a filter that didn't allow you to just lose yourself in it. Like, right now, this is the first time in my life these last few years since I've been doing my YouTube stuff that I've been able to go, oh, I get what people mean now when they say they can escape into a video game, or they can immerse themselves. Because I told Ken Levine this, I never finished BioShock 1. I enjoyed what I played, and I really enjoyed Infinite. But I said right at the beginning, when there's the plane crash and you're walking through, or the plane crashes into the tube or something starts flooding. It's been a while since I played it, but there's a part where you're walking through this glass tube under the ocean that's leaking, and there's like a fish on the ground that's flopping around. And I said, most fans probably, if they noticed that at all, were like, that's so neat, that's so immersive, I feel so in this world. And all I was thinking of is, I bet there was some poor son of a bitch junior designer at 3 a.m. having to go through and place the fish in the tube, right?
Yeah.
And so you it's like anything else, whatever your job is, once you learn how it gets made, the magic goes away a little bit. So it's nice to have the magic back, is what I would say. And really I'm enjoying that.
So really funny. So funny you say that, because I did film production at college. So now when I watch movies and stuff, I always spot things and it just ruins it. Like I almost know what's coming. I know where the plot's going, or the cuts were off, lighting was different, or the props, like drinking and eating stuff specifically, I always spot. Like the next shot, the sandwich is half back, and you're like, fuck me. Millions of pounds spent on that movie, yet they fucked up on the sandwich. So I can completely agree.
And I think that is why I say it's hard sometimes. Like on one hand, when I do the stuff I do on my channel, I feel I put a premium on honesty, because I want to be a real genuine voice for people who are coming to the channel. And at the same time, though, it's not that people want to be lied to, but I struggle to know when it's good to just let people be fans and believe the fantasy. Not because you're misleading them to be a dick or you're trying to pull money out of their pocket, but because in some ways that's part of the entertainment, right? Like if you think of somebody like Tom Cruise, which I'm not comparing any of us on this podcast to Tom Cruise, but in terms of like when you see him out there and he's meeting with fans, he's clearly performing. It's not, he's not giving you the actual man, Tom Cruise, who's got challenges in his life and this, that, and the other. He's like, oh my God, that was so great. I love that you love that. I love that you love that scene in the movie. That means so much to me. Thank you so, and it's what the fans want. Right. But it's not always accurate. And I don't know. I'll go to my grave or my cremation urn or whatever the fuck I'm going, I may never have that worked out in my head. Like how much honesty to share versus how much fandom joy to not pop that bubble. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you get those actors that are fully transparent and just don't want to talk to anyone or do anything. Right. They do something a little bit out of character, and then
and on one hand, it's like, oh, I appreciate that. He's like, dude, I'm Edward Norton, right? I'm an actor. I'm not that guy. I show up. I have problems like you do. I got to take a shit for the last 3 days, but I'm constipated. Whatever.
Yeah.
And on one hand, you go, I love that. I love that genuineness. And on the other hand, you're like, dude, stop fucking messing up my little fantasy. I got to go to work in 20 minutes. Let me have this.
I quite like that it humanizes them, though. I quite like that. Like, I do feel like at the end of the day, I feel it makes it more impressive that they can.
You wouldn't be saying that if you met Ian McKellen and you said, "Can you sign my staff?" And he said, "Fuck off."
Did he say that?
Constipated. No, because if he did,
because we know the Lord of the Rings is a documentary, and Ian McKellen is actually Gandalf. That's different, mate. I was going to talk like Adrian Brody or something like that. Mate, I know Elijah Wood is Frodo, who pretends to be Elijah Wood. Like that's clear in my mind. But people
it was so It was so funny, though. I was at a lunch when I worked on Twisted Metal 2012, and I was meeting, Sony had hired a new producer to produce it for the Sony side. And we're all having lunch, and I said something about some movie, and he says, oh, my brother auditioned for that. I'm like, oh, well, who's your brother? Like, why are you bringing that up? Who the fuck we're in LA, everybody's brother's auditioning for everything, right? And he's like, oh, it's Elijah, because his last name was Wood. And so the producer of Twisted Metal 2012 was Elijah Wood's brother. That's wild. Elijah Wood was I remember seeing him at E3 playing Twisted Metal Black on the show floor. And he was like one of the few celebrities I ever saw playing a game I worked on. And now his brother, Zach, is the head of Blumhouse Games, doing all their horror games. So it's just kind of funny how all that, just kind of...
Because I know Elijah does have an interest in video games. Like he's a big Animal Crossing fan. And I swear he did something for someone in the video game space. But that's neat to hear.
Yeah.
I like those kind of stories. Okay, David, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's super appreciated.
Thank you guys for having me. If you have gone through all of the brilliant content on Retro Dodo and you're looking for something else to watch, my friends, something else to listen to, if you're looking to have your fandom popped, your fandom cherry popped in the truth, but also a guy who wants to tell you the truth and also wants to keep your fantasy alive, after you're done with Retro Dodo for the day, come on over to David Jaffe on YouTube And there's a lot of good stuff there about video games and games I've worked on and games I'm playing. It's a great deal of fun. Hopefully we'll see you there.
Definitely check it out, guys. Everybody go over and show David some love. And thank you for joining us today and for
anytime
enlightening us and taking us all the way back to from Mickey Mania to God of War. It's been a fantastic journey with you.
And Cliffhanger. Don't forget Cliffhanger on the Game Boy.
How could we forget Cliffhanger and Sky Blazer?
I'm going on eBay right now.
You better get that. I mean, that is the worst. Like, I think if God is dead, it's because that game killed him. It's the worst.
So
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David. See ya.